This is Alyson Wilson. I am a member of the Huron Historical Society in Huron, Ohio, and I'm presenting to you today on the neighborhoods of Huron. This is part one of a three-part series. Before I begin, I just want to let you know that this is a nonprofit organization who could greatly appreciate either benefiting from a membership from you or buying any of our DVDs or booklets that are available on our website, www.thehuronhistoricalsociety.org. So the first part of the series is on the 19th century first neighborhoods of Huron, when Huron's harbor was the economic hub. And around the harbor you had the Old Plat and the east side, and then the city, or the village at the time, expanded to the south to Oklahoma. I would also like to emphasize in the video the significance of the vacation land at Rye Beach out on Huron's west side. This is just a layout of the population at the time from the 1800s to the 1920s, and I just wanted to lay out significant events that would have caused people to move to Huron and increase our neighborhood size. This includes anything from our shipbuilding and commercial fishing industries to the immigrants that were brought to Huron for the iron ore and coal docks, and the building of the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad. So I'm going to begin with just highlighting on a map the areas that I'm going to emphasize. So the larger circle is the Old Plat, and on either side you have Huron Beach. On the west side you have what I call the Near East side, just on the other side of the docks, and you have Oklahoma to the Plat's south. And then the smaller circle is Rye Beach, which was a destination point on the Lakeshore Electric. So our village was founded in 1809, and it was not platted officially until 1824 due to a delay of paperwork during the War of 1812. At that time when it was platted in Huron County, which is now Erie County. You'll notice on this map, this is the Old Plat downtown, and the streets are not the same as they currently are. So if you go from the north to the south, you have Lake Street, then you have William Street, which was an east-west street, and you have South Street, which remains to be South Street to this day. The north-south streets I'm going to name from the first cove to the river. So on the first cove you have West Street, which is still called West. You have Ohio and Centers, which still remain those streets. But Milan Street is our current William Street, and Water Street is our current Main Street. I'd first like to share with you just a few of the significant homes of the Old Plat. This is the Eicher House. It's at 303 Center Street. I knew this as the hub growing up, and it's pretty much always been a multi-family home. It's at the corner of Center and Cleveland, which used to be Center and Homan. To the right of the old picture is the current picture of the hub. The house features a widow's walk, and most of its life, again, it was a multi-family home. In the old picture, if you look beyond the tree, that is what is now Captain Montague's or Captain Montague's home that is now a bed and breakfast. So on this, we have two homes noted. We have the Wickham home, which is at 209 Center. It is an 1839 Greek revival. And on the right, you have what is now Captain Montague's. It's at 229 Center, and it was also built by the Wickhams in 1881. This next home is the Ray House. It is across the street from the Huron Library. It's at 401 Center, and it was built in 1903 in the Queen Anne style. The Graham family has upgraded the house, and that's your picture on the right. I want to share with you two interesting Scott homes. The Scott family is on its 4th or 5th generation in Huron, and they had 2 homes that were moved. The Scotts moved one of the homes from Piety Hill to 213 Ohio Street in 1887. If you look on the map to the right, you will see a Wall Street. That is our current Wall Street. You will see a star. That is our current lakefront park. So you can gather from looking at that map that everything to the north of the star is no longer. It was swallowed by the lake. Well, the Scotts wanted to save their home, so they moved their home from the lake up Ohio Street. The other Scott home was moved all the ways from Cleveland on this barge. So when you look at this barge, there are 2 houses being moved. And this home was moved to 211 Ohio Street from the Huff area of Cleveland's east side in 1956. The 2 homes had been on display at the mall in Cleveland as part of a facelifting project, and they were featured in the national magazine called Life. This house is just representative of what we call kit houses. The Swanbecks currently live here at 116 Center Street. But this is a Sears Roebuck and Company kit home that was built in 1938, and it is the Martha Washington model. Lastly, on the Plat, I just want to share the people. This is skating on the first cove. I think this picture is significant because it shows also the Lakeshore Electric's abutments where the trolley did run through. Both coves still have abutments that are obvious, so if you go down to West Street, which is now Sail Away, you can still see evidence of the abutments from the Lakeshore Electric. These 2 pictures are on the left is a set of homes that are no longer standing. It's taken from 208 Main, where the Wiegans had their fishery, and it's looking across the street, and that's one of the Wiegans in the picture. And across the street, those homes no longer stand. They are in the parking lot that is opposite the Twine House now. The home on the right is a picture of them moving the home from Main Street up by the donut shop down to Wall Street. So this home was moved from Main to 107 Williams, and the Swanbecks moved into it in 1950. The old Plat started creeping south to what became Oklahoma. This is Adams Street in Oklahoma, and some people called this the West End, as I understand. I've looked at the names on the streets of Adams, Wilbur, and Taylor, and I had to just draw some conclusions on my own until I get to do more research in this neighborhood, and I concluded that Philo Adams, who was Huron Harbor developer who died in 1864 and had property in this area, his daughter married a Wilbur. So I suspect that the origins of those 2 street names, Adams and Wilbur, is named after that family. As for the Oklahoma name of the neighborhood, most suspect that it was just an endearing term, like the state, where it was way out there. You might as well be in Oklahoma. So it was a little further out of town. Bill Lucht wanted me to share that Oklahoma was a great place for kids. So in this picture, you see Bill on his Monarch bike. He delivered 100 Sandusky papers to the homes, and he was a paper boy, and now he's a pastor. He wanted me to share that the Oklahoma Park had a merry-go-round, a jungle gym, slide, and swings, that kids played tackle sandlot football, and I found lots of evidence that baseball was popular there too. When time to come home, Bill said, "Mother blew the whistle. She got out of a Cracker Jack box." In 1965, another park was dedicated. Mrs. Fabens deeded the land to the city in memory of her husband, Colonel Andrew Fabens. Oklahoma had some notables, and one was the Oklahoma Quartet, which consisted of 4 women, Hannah Hennis, Laura Beckloff, Carrie Wilkes, and Lottie Toomey. And these women were members of the Evangelical Church. They performed at many public events. There's evidence that they performed at most of the graduation ceremonies. They performed at the Opera House or auditorium in the town hall. They performed at Cedar Point, and they performed on the radio. In the middle, you see a picture of Boys of the West, which was a group of boys, and that also included a weekend. And they had a shack that is up where where the bypass is, and they cooked game at their clubhouse. So they were kind of a hunting group. The photo on the right is a picture of a truck that was used to haul fish nets. You'll see that it has like a rotating spool on it to pull up the fish nets. Bill Luck recalls that commercial fishermen who resided in Oklahoma would bring home tarred nets from the fish house and lay them across the lots to mend them. The Oklahoma area had a little bit of a change when they decided to put in the bypass in the 1960s. So I am showing 3 buildings that no longer are in the bypass area. 2 of them are standing, and those 2 are Adam Beckloff's brick house, which is still on Adams, and then the contemporary Butler residence was moved to Wabu Avenue and is currently owned by Tom Hastings. Wabu is the name of the Wade and Butlers put together to form a street name. On the right is the Zion Lutheran Church that was torn down in 1961, and this predates the church that is out on Main Street or Route 13 south of town. Now I'm going to take you to the east side. Immigrants settle on the east side of Huron River where they work at the docks and the rails. And most of these immigrants started out being Italians and Hungarians, and then came the Germans. So here you see pictures of the immigrants and a large photo of what is Berlin Street. Berlin Street was the street that connected the east side to the west side where the Huron River Bridge was. So when you're looking at this street, you will notice the electrical poles. That is evidence that the trolley was running down this street. So this is the Mears home across from the Harris store on Berlin Street near the ore docks. In this 1910 map, I wanted to show how Berlin Street crossed the river. So I've got a circle to have your eyes go towards the river, and you don't see the road crossing the river because the bridge is currently open. It is a swing bridge. While you're looking at the aerial, notice there's very few homes on the east side of Huron. You see the Near East, which is where the immigrants were living. And then you see some homes further to the east, which is likely the Meeker Homestead and the Willows that the Stuarts lived in. So here's some memories of the east side. Recently on Facebook, we had posts about Cooch. He had Cooches, and his real name is Omiko Carmel. In the middle, you have some boys in the 50s with their bikes. And on the far right is Otto's camp. This is a picture from 1929. And this was a camp owned by Otto Hoegruff. And I will show you where this camp was on my map. So we have a map next to an aerial. So Tom Root gave us a collection of aerial photos that he took. So you'll see the east side on the left, and on the right, I don't recall who turned this into us, but they took time to show where everything was located and whose property was what. And you will see if you go down Tiffin Avenue and then you bear to the right, you're going to go towards past Esposito's house, and you take a right, you're at the Sandbar. So the Sandbar's over on McKinley. Cooches would have been over on McKinley. You'll see a camp at the very end called Detro's, Dick Detro's camp, And across from Cooch's on McKinley, you will see Otto's camp. Lastly, I would like to go a little further west in town where Rye Beach formed, and it is principally formed as summer residences for vacationers, many of whom came on the interurban cars that you see pictured here. So that is the interurban car crossing Huron Bridge. So in 1899, the Lakeshore Electric makes its first stop in Huron. And in Christensen's Lakeshore Electric book of 1978, he wrote of the Lakeshore Electric and our area. Ohio's Riviera lured the trolley traveler with its bonanza of bathing, picnicking, dancing, and boating, exploration, amusements, religion, or just a day away from the humdrum of small-town life. So besides having just Rye Beach at the time, we also had camps at Sages Grove and Anderson Acres. By the 1920s, it was written that VA Freeze lumber couldn't even keep up with the demand of wood needed to build these new neighborhoods. The picture in the lower right is the VA Freeze Lumber Company. In the 1890s, the Bruns brothers envisioned Rye Beach Park. It was Henry and William, and they bought Wolverton Grove. They targeted church groups and military regiments. But the first order of business for William was to build a peanut stand. So that was the first business in Rye Beach, but Rye Beach did develop into the village of Rye Beach Park. The 1920s, William had died and Henry had expanded the park, and the first homeowners association came into being with new water, sewer treatment plants, a school, a dock, and a boat harbor. Just so you know, by 1962, many of the street names changed. I did not give you a map on this, but that is a big note, and the reason is because they had streets of Parkview, Parkland, Parkside, Park. They had streets of Lakeview, Lakeland, Lake this, Lake that. So they changed many of the names to avoid the confusion. But the significance of the picture I'm giving you is not only is it cool to see all these women on the second level of this house, but there's two things to note. There was an Ohio State flag on one side of the door and a Michigan State flag on the door. So that shows how long the rivalry has been going on, because this is a very old picture from the early 1900s. And above the door it says Pile Inn, P-Y-L-E. It is my understanding that street names was not how you were located back in the early 1900s. You were located by a cottage name, and that most cottages had names above their door that the postmaster knew. And when you got your mail, there was usually a common corner box for everybody, and you went to the box and you picked out the mail that was yours, and then you put the rest of the mail back in the box. Most of the Rye Beach photos you're going to find somewhere on the internet, because Ernst Niebergall's photos became pretty famous. These are all Ernst Niebergall photos. You'll see in the upper left is the entrance from the Lakeshore Electric, and the lower left is an interior view of the dancers at the dance hall, and on the right is the early dance hall. This is the first dance hall, and it appears that it is down by the lake. Here's some more contemporary Rye Beach photos. On the upper left is the dance hall that some old timers still recall. It was there from 1922 to 1943, and it went from dance hall to become a ice rink, but the fire destroyed it in 1943. Other photos are in the upper right. That is a store. I've seen some postcards labeled Dickerson's. In the lower right is your lagoon, and that lagoon doesn't really look like that anymore. It is not as navigable because they built an easier way to get to the island, and that island is called Torquatus Island, and there's still original homes on the island. And in the middle you see people getting off the Lakeshore Electric, And on the lower left is an interior of a store. You can see the bananas hanging from the ceiling there. Lastly, I'd like to recognize the Osters, the Osterlings. I grew up with the Osterling family, and they were the managers of Oster's Trailer Park and Oster's Dairy Bar. And I remember them being the home of Oster's Broasters, which was an excellent roasted chicken. Here's a picture of Max Osterling building the main building in the travel park that I understand most people did their laundry in. Here's a picture of the dairy bar that is currently Lemmy's restaurant. And then I also want to note one of the most beautiful houses in Rye Beach is the Buster Brown house. It is named because the owner of Buster Brown's owned the home, and Agnes Majoy in town told me that when she lived there, there were in the attic many, many, many left shoes. So in other words, there was a display of left shoes up in the attic that had been left there by Buster Brown, and many people enjoyed this oddity. The Huron Historical Society is a nonprofit organization, and we would very much benefit from memberships and the purchases of our productions that are available on our gift link and our membership link at www.thehuronhistoricalsociety.org. This second part pretty much focuses on the 20s to the 50s. So I labeled it "The Roaring 20s Bring Promise of New Neighborhoods," followed by the frustration of depression. You will note that there was all kinds of excitement in the 20s to build, but as the Depression came into being, a lot of things came to a halt, and it was the 40s and almost post-war before building continued. I'm going to focus on post-World War I economy, and the west side neighborhoods I would like to feature are Huron Beach, North Palm Beach, Oak Point Subdivision, Grand Forest Beach, and Willow Grove. And on the east side, I'm going to feature Old Homestead and Chaska. So here's my detail of the population. You can see pretty much between 1910 and 1950 that our population doubled. We're going towards the baby boom generation. We're also going towards the auto industries moving in the 1940s of new departure, and the Huron grain elevator opened in the 1940s. In this map, I wanted to point out the neighborhoods. I'm going to discuss them from right to left, which is from east to west, because many people have never heard of North Palm Beach or Oak Point Subdivision. So let's start just looking. You see the old Plat. Turtle Bay is across from the high school. Then it goes the Cove. And then you have the green, which is Huron Beach. You have the blue, which is North Palm, and that consists of the streets of Ashland, Erie, and Perry. You have Oak Point Subdivision, which most of us call Olemaker's Curve, and that only has Drive Boulevard. You have Grand Forest Beach, which consists of two sides of Cleveland Road. The Lakeshore Electric ran through there. The north side is named after cities, and the south side is alphabetically named after trees. And then the last one I will talk about is Willow Grove, which is right before the Cove of Rye Beach. Huron Beach in 1906 had a Detroit salesman come in. His name was B.E. Taylor, and he wanted to try his sale tactics on Huronites. So he gave away a free lot to try to stimulate lot purchases. A 1909 newspaper noted that his tactics were not very successful, and actually he had been met with few payments for the lots. In this picture, I just wanted to show you an aerial view of what we call the Second Cove. The Second Cove is basically across from the high school, the current high school on Cleveland Road, and I wanted you to note that between the cove and the lake are the abutments of the Lakeshore Electric. In the map, I wanted you to note where the tracks are. So it was not called Superior Avenue going through Huron Beach, it was called Lake Street, and you'll see that the homes were built on both the north and the south side of the tracks. Also, the street names are different. We still have First Street over by the Cove, but instead of calling it Huronia Beach, it was called Erie. West of that is the 1920s North Palm Beach. North Palm Beach was recently acknowledged by the neighborhood by putting up these nice new signs, and to note that it's a private drive, and it consists again of Peary, Ashland, and Erie Aves. In 1929, the plat that became North Palm Beach consisted of 65 acres on 9 acres of what was Quimby Wright's property, the son of Jabez Wright. So I want to take this time just to note that most of the property on the west side of Huron, west of the coves, was Wright property at the time, and it was divvied up to become these neighborhoods. On the right, you have a picture of the William Bruns house at the corner of Sylvan and Cleveland Road. While it is called Willow Grove, where William Bruns lived, I remembered it as Osage oranges all along the highway that I had to avoid with my bicycle. And I guess some of you call those monkey balls. So I just wanted to acknowledge that Willow Grove was platted in 1934, and the alley now known as Bruns Street was named after the Bruns family. And that alley and the pipe over the creek connected residents to the Rye Beach. That inlet was popular for ice skating. 1920s Oak Point subdivision, or what you call Olemaker's Curb, was formed by professors of Ohio State, mostly men without children. It was the men and their wives, formed this subdivision on property of Jabez Wright's. The sole street is Drive Boulevard. So there you have a picture of the professors. And I find this property interesting because of all the details that the Druffer family has kept and secured of some of the oldest deeds in the county. So I wanted to read to you what many of the deeds of Erie County say, because we live in the Firelands. So the deed reads, "The original proprietors were the original sufferers from losses sustained during the Revolutionary War by reason of having their property destroyed by fire in 7 towns in the state of Connecticut, and the Firelands, or Huron County, was given these sufferers by an act of the General Assembly of 1792. And I also was thrilled to see an authentic signature of Douglas Wright that you can see there. So Oaks Point subdivision used to have this nice pier or boardwalk out into the lake. It was destroyed in a storm in 1972, but the pier was not uncommon to look like that along the west side. I also wanted to note the concretions that we grew up with. Most of us call them boulders. They're technically called concretions. And the class of 1959 took one of these concretions and put it in front of Huron High School, and today that still remains the graffiti rock. Moving west of Oak Point, you had Camp Boulder. So here you have photos of Camp Boulder, and you'll see the cabins. These cabins were auctioned off. I believe it was, I don't remember if it was the 1970s. And Mr. Common bought 3 of these cabins, and you can see in the lower picture, those 3 cabins now stand across from Huron High School, where we have the turkeys. So the cabins were moved, and they're across from Huron High School. I also took pictures of Boulder Shores and Oakshire to show how those condominium complexes were evidence of the history of Camp Boulder being at that corner and Oak Point subdivision. We have a large collection of photos of Grand Forest Beach. It is called the Strom Collection, and we also have the original sales brochures. Here are the sales brochures of Grand Forest Beach, and you'll see it was called Grand Forest Beach Club, and the idea was it was going to be more than just homes. It was going to have a clubhouse and tennis courts and some other ball games. So they show you a picture of the clubhouse, which is the Esch House, and the Esch Mrs. Esch was a Wright. And unfortunately, this brochure from 1923 that was marketed to the Mansfield community to indicate there'd be a clubhouse, it turned out that in 1929 the house caught on fire, so that never came to fruition. So Grand Forest Beach was christened Grand Forest Beach in 1921, and the idea was to lure the people of Mansfield up Route 299. Route 299 is now called Route 13. Other cities that were lured up here were Shelby and Bucyrus. Here are pictures before the homes were built, so you can see this beautiful Cleveland Road. Cleveland Road has also been called Sandusky Road, Market Road, Homan Street. But you can see that on either side you have the electric again that shows that the Lakeshore Electric ran through here up until 1916 when it had to get rerouted. So at the ends of the streets you'll see that the columns are topped with these white balls that most of us believe mimic the boulders that were out in the lake, and that the streets are named after cities on the north and trees on the south. Even if you lived on the south side of Cleveland Road, you were assigned a beach. You were assigned to Beach A, Beach B, or Beach C. And connecting the north side streets was the path, which was how I got to school growing up, and that's how I played with all my friends in the neighborhood, was riding through the path. And in the lower right, you will see a picture of a home on the beach, and I want you to note the stick contraption on the far corner. That is called a rustic house. And at the end of each street, there was an easement for everyone to have access to the beach. And at the top of the beach was this rustic house, which is some fairly substantial sticks that were put together to form a place where you could throw your towels and where you could sit before you went down to the beach. In this photo, you'll see at the top is a beach scene. Basically, if you're looking at that scene, you're standing on one of our T-piers looking up towards, I believe it's either Columbus Avenue or Sandusky. And while it's hard to see the details, there are actually Model Ts up there, and the women are dressed in what I would call wool, black, long bathing suits. Down in the lower left is your typical Grand Beach Forest home. A lot of them were bungalows, and again, you'll see a Model T. And then we had T-piers at the end of each street to provide protection and to keep the sand available for us to enjoy life on. I also wanted to note modern Grand Forest. Modern Grand Forest tended to be around the streets of Lima, Bucyrus, Toledo, and Cleveland, and on the south side, and much of that was developed by Ray Hind. He had Keystone Homes, and many of you know Ray Hind's son-in-law, John Halter. He also continued in the sales of real estate. At the upper right, Ray Hind had purchased these cabins. These are called the Lakeview Cabins. They were down by Lima Avenue, and they were a little controversial for the neighborhood because the neighbors had deeds that said they had specific beach rights, and the neighborhood really did not want to share those beach rights with a motel. So now that we've completed the west side, let's move over to two neighborhoods of the east side. So in this map, I wanted to note Old Homestead 1, Old Homestead 2, then Chaska, and then we'll deal with Beechwood when we get to the 1960s. So Old Homestead and most of the property that is on the east side was owned by A.W. Meeker. And in 1837, his homestead was split between his daughters Meta and Hannah. The home started in 1837. His home still stands at the beach at Old Homestead. It's on Oneida. I don't know if that's between 1 and 2. And it still stands. And he had daughters, Meta and Hannah, and in 1922, that neighborhood was split. Meta Breckenridge developed the west half of his property and named it Old Homestead. The 1859 Meeker home still stands. The Old Homestead Beach Association was granted ownership of Harborview Beach, the tennis courts, and 2 parks. So here you see Meta in the middle. You see my father, Gordon Meeker, at the dedication of the Old Meeker Farm sign that was provided by Huron Parks and Rec and the Historical Society. You will see pictures of, that is Park Stewart in his canoe, enjoying lake time, and you'll see a reconstructed entrance to the park or to the neighborhood that served as the Lakeshore Electric Stop 22.5. And of course, in the upper right, I put that on there because I was learning throughout all this that it's definitely distinct whether you live in Old Homestead 1 or 2. Here is the 1920s Old Homestead on the Lake map, and I just put that up there to note the distinction between Old Homestead 1 and 2. And really, none of the street names have changed. It was an untouched neighborhood. I want to focus on one older home. It was built in 1897 before Old Homestead was formed. This is the Stuart Home. It is about 4 doors down from the Meeker homestead. You'll see both the current home picture in the upper right and a picture of it in 1897 or the early 1900s down in the lower right. This property is unique to me because the house is built on sand. So even today when you go into this house, there's evidence of a lot of shifting. And so the walls, you'll see a lot of breakage in the walls. There'll be breakage in some of the stone floors near the hearth. But it's definitely constant movement from the sand. And when you walk out in front, it's very obvious that there's high dunes in front of you. I don't think of Huron as having dunes, but when you're standing in his lawn, the dunes are much higher than the home. In the center, I just put a picture that Harlan Stewart wanted to share of how the original furniture is still in the home. So you have a family picture from the early 1900s in the furniture on the bottom, and he just repainted it, and you'll see the wicker furniture in the top. Another neat thing in Old Homestead is its Lustron Homes. There were 4 Lustron Homes. Lustron Homes were prefabricated porcelain enameled steel houses that were developed after World War II due to the housing shortage. They were 1,400 square feet. They were typically pastel, and they were put together as hooked panels. So here you see a picture of one that has been disassembled and moved. I believe it was moved out of state. These homes, I have been told, were made in Columbus, Ohio. Now we're going to move to the other half of the A.W. Meeker family. A.W.'s daughter, Hattie Stein, developed and named Chaska Beach. Chaska Beach supposedly is an Indian word, Chaska meaning little boy, and it was named after Wright Stein, who was Hattie's little boy. So here you have the entrance without any homes down in the lower left. You have a brochure in the middle, and on the right is what I'd like to focus on, and that is an aerial picture. So this picture was taken in 1947, and the foreground is Chaska. The very upper part is Old Homestead 1, and you'll notice that Old Homestead 2 was yet to be developed. So that can kind of tell you that Chaska proceeded first, then Old Homestead 1, and then Old Homestead 2. I put up a picture of the Chaska Map, and it notes on it that it was strictly private and highly exclusive. Down in the lower right, you'll see Lakeway, which is still Lakeway today. In the middle, you see photos that Jeff Ulrich and Barb Beckling provided me from their book called Chaska Beach Houses. And that concludes my early 20th century neighborhood presentation. This third part series focuses on the 1950s to modern Huron. And I titled it 1950s Growth Brings the Split Level, the Ranch on a Slab, and Concrete Streets. Two notes: during this period in 1955, we grew so much that we got 1,000 more people through an annexation of the west side of Huron that we were able to become a city in 1961 because we met the 5,000 person mark. So we're at the World War II baby boom. We are having the Glidden plant, the lime plant, and additional auto industries in Sandusky move in that are bringing people from New Jersey, Connecticut, all over, and we are growing very quickly. In order to support this growth, we also put in new bridges, we had to bring in more bypasses, and just in general, our transportation opportunities improved such that we pretty much became a bedroom community, such that you could drive to work all the ways to Cleveland. So here again is just a look at the population. So in 1950s, we're at 2,500. In 1980s, we're at 7,100. So we had this strong baby boom. So I'm going to feature the neighborhoods of Elwood Heights, Huron Heights, Forest Hills, Beechwood Cove, and just touch on Colonial Colony and Village Green. So here's the map. We're now spreading further east and further south. So Beechwood Cove is far on the east side. It is blue in this picture. Then we also have Huron Heights, which is down the river. It is yellow in this picture. And we have Forest Hills, which is red. It is off of Main Street. So I'm going to start with the 1954 Forest Hills. This is an ad for Phase 1 of Forest Hills, and the developer is the same developer in Vermilion that developed much of the Sailor Way area of Vermilion, so that's similar houses. And you'll see that they emphasized California contemporary living. So I've been told that these were called the California houses, which were basically ranches that were built on a concrete slab. Next to it, I'm featuring Valley View, which is the other street that parallels Forest Hills, and I wanted you to note that the cost of a home in 1955 was $15,950. Also in the 1950s, we were building Shawnee School, and next to Shawnee School was Elwood Heights. Elwood Heights has an entrance that is opposite the Chaska Beach entrance. So in 1952, Elmer Forthover purchased 21 acres, and he partnered with Washburn and Fantozzi to build many of the homes. The fact that his name is Elmer is likely the reason it's called Elwood Heights. One of the residents of Elwood Heights is the Majoy family, and I specifically talked to Tyke Majoy. This is the Majoy Builders truck. They built not only in this area, but they built a lot in Huron Heights, as you'll see in a minute. But what was unique about Tyke's house is his address. So I have here a map to show you two things. His address is 810 Lincoln on the map. But on either side of 810 Lincoln is 534 Lincoln and 546 Lincoln. So the postmaster had told Tyke, this is the number I want you to have, we're changing all the numbers, but it actually never came to fruition. So I had a very difficult time finding his house when I went to see him. Also on the map, you can note in the middle there's an easement. It's below the First Baptist Church icon, and that was to go to the 3rd Street. So Elwood Heights was to be 3 streets. It was to be Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln. But because the 3rd Street wasn't coming to fruition, Jefferson was renamed Lincoln, and that was a good idea because we already had a Jefferson Street over by the railroad tracks on Main. Forthover said it was very hard to keep up with building. I quote him saying, "I guess I just have to work a little harder. Homes are still scarce in this area. Customers move in faster than we can build. It has been this way now for 10 years. So the baby boom definitely was having effect on keeping up with building. That now leads us to Huron Heights, which is located on the Huron River and Mudbrook. So in 1953, brothers Myron and Roy Kaufman partnered with Ed Tint to form KTK Corporation. And they also partnered with the Solbergs for the marina and the Palmers for the golf greens. So after 2 years, in 1955, they completed the lagoons. Here you see pictured Roy Kaufman discussing the greens with Dick Palmer. You'll see the Lustron Home, which was made into a clubhouse. And you'll see a home on Brookview Drive, which that was a feature that I wanted to note was built by the Majoys. Here's an aerial of 1950s Huron Heights. And I just wanted to feature the Solberg family. That's their picture of their family down in the lower left. And in the middle is a picture I found on their website, how they are trying to locate the very first client they ever had. That's the picture of the couple pulling in their boat in the slip, and they commemorated the picture, but they're still looking for the name of the couple. In the ad for Huron Heights, it said they were going to have 1,500 berths for the boats, but I only noted 250 on the website of the marina. So I just want to take an interlude to note the 1955 annexation. It was Huron Beach down to Rye Beach. And so in 1961 we had our city status, and in 1969 we had the urban renewal. So I wanted to just note a picture of urban renewal. This map is an overlay of the presentation. What is in red is what was going to be the future urban renewal, and that is overlaid onto the original map. So you can see that the boat basin, which is that semicircle, is at the same location of VA Freeze Lumber. And that street called Freeze Street was the Berlin Street where we used to cross Huron River and come into the village. If you want to know anything about urban renewal, there is a video called Downtown Interrupted. You'll also see there a really neat picture of the aerial of them building the boat basin. And then I wanted you to note that in 1962, due to the confusion of so many similar street names, in one council meeting, they changed the names of 32 streets. Now I'm going to go over to the east side and look at Beechwood Cove. Beechwood Cove was formerly called Sage's Grove. It was owned by the Sage family, and it is significant in the history of the Lakeshore Electric. So I have heard people even come in recently and say they dig in their backyard in Beechwood Cove and they're finding parts of the Lakeshore Electric. So I wanted to note these two side-by-side pictures. On the map, you see my arrow, and it is pointed to a track along the lake. That is the first track that dates from the 1890s to 1913 storm. When the storm came in, it took out a part of the track, and they had to rethink and relocate where the Lakeshore Electric track was to be. So if you go down to what looks like our current Cleveland Road, that became the new track. Because of these problems, the Lakeshore Electric purchased Sage's Grove, and you'll see on the right they turned the trolleys on the old track into cabins. So you have what appears to be a dozen cabins along the beach that are actually old trolley cars from the Lakeshore Electric. So here's some more pictures of the Lakeshore Electric trolley cars. The one is as recent as 1964. And the one in the middle is known to be the last picture taken in 1937 of a Lakeshore Electric train coming through Huron. On the far right, one of the reasons the Lakeshore Electric was significant to the company, one of the reasons Sages Grove was significant to the company was because the sand pits for the Lakeshore Electric were located on the beach of Sages Grove. So what's a sand pit? So you'll see all the men, they're standing on sand in the upper picture, and in the lower picture you see them digging sand. What they did is they threw the sand up towards the tracks, and as a train went over the sand pit, it had a scoop that came down from the train. It would scoop up the sand and take the sand onto the train. The purpose of the sand is to provide friction for the braking system of the train. So this sand pit supplied the lake route of the Lakeshore Electric with their basis for how they braked the trains. So Marsh Brown in the 1961 developed what he called Sages Grove Inc., and he presented a plan to council for Beechwood Cove. His first street he discussed was Valleywood Drive, and he said the residents were to dredge a lagoon and dock their boats right in front of their homes. So first of all, most of you do not know what Valleywood Drive is. That was one of the streets renamed in 1962. That became Gateway Boulevard. Then you'll see pictures of ads on the right, and they noted that they were some of the first concrete streets in Huron. In the center, you have a picture of the former Anderson Acres camp, and they had their own dock, and that was located where Beechwood Villas is now. Lastly, the 1960s neighborhoods I will note are Colonial, Colony, and Village Green. Again, the Klingshirn came from Vermilion, and he bought up the land that was known as Kittyland. It is next to the current Huron High School, and he bought the Kittyland and a trailer park and erected housing and the Colonial Colony apartment complex. 5 years later, he started Village Green. So there's an ad for a split level in Village Green. So in concluding the series, I just want to note that there were other notable neighborhoods that I'm researching. Wexford, Park Ridge, which is an expansion off of Oklahoma, Huron Green, which is in the township, Eagle Crest, whose entrance is opposite Beechwood, Troct Meadows, which is down by Barnes Roses and Camp Road, Songwood Reserve has a part 1 on Rye Beach Road and a second part on Huron Avery, and Willow Creek is across from Slate Cut on Hall Road. You'll see that Dave Dreffer was instrumental in much of this development. And I also wanted to note we have Fitzgerald Allotment that is off of Hall Road, and Troct Meadows was built by Bob Troct. So that I don't slight anybody, I noticed all the different estates and developments that occurred in the township, and people were struck by 2 they'd never heard of. They never heard of Bland Varcom's subdivision, which is Autumn Drive, and they never heard of Wildwood subdivision, which is Scheid Road between Huron Avery and Route 13. So I appreciate you taking an interest in the neighborhoods. Again, if you haven't seen all 3 parts, this is a 3-part series. broken into early 19th century, pre-1950s, and 1950s to present. Thank you.